Europe's refugee challenge. Experts say more needs to be done before harsh weather arrives. African expats give back to their birth countries. And on this Veterans Day, the funky side of U.S. Naval Academy midshipmen. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin in East Africa, where Kenyan security forces say they have destroyed 5 camps used by suspected militants linked to the Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab during a sweep of a forest on the country's north coast. Al-Shabaab has been behind a spate of attacks on Kenya over the past 2 years, including an assault on Nairobi's Westgate shopping mall that killed 67 people, and a raid on Garissa University in the northeast that killed almost 150. The militants also launched several attacks in 2014 that left more than 100 dead in the Lamu County region. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department is offering rewards for information leading to the identification or location of 6 key leaders of Al-Shabaab, up to $6 million for information on the whereabouts of Abu Ubaidah, and up to $5 million each for information on Mahat Karate, Maalim Daoud, and Hassan Afgoye, and up to $3 million each for information on Maalim Salman and Ahmed Iman Ali. Well, a group of more than 60 leaders from Africa and the European Union are meeting Wednesday and Thursday in Malta in an attempt to improve their response to the migration crisis that has seen hundreds of thousands of people fleeing to Europe this year. The EU says the summit will focus on the reasons why people are leaving their home countries, better organization of legal migration channels, boosting protection for migrants, battling smugglers, and improving cooperation with African nations on returning people who do not qualify for asylum.
The protection of human rights and of the lives of those that are in danger, the cooperation of all the countries, not only the northern countries and the southern countries, but also among the different southern countries in terms of readmission, with a strong focus, of course, on voluntary repatriation. And then the investment in terms of building up the asylum system.
Well, thousands of migrants, many of them from war-torn Syria and Afghanistan, continue arriving daily on Greek islands before pushing westward through the Balkans to Western Europe. Italy has also been inundated in the past year with migrants, mostly from Africa and Asia. While Europe's largest humanitarian crisis since World War II is far from over, refugees in huge numbers are traveling through the Balkans to reach their destination in the rich countries of the European Union. But as winter approaches, there is an urgent need for more funds to accommodate the migrants. VOA's Yane Bojadovic has more.
Mild weather in Europe has so far contributed to the continuing high numbers of migrants arriving in Europe via the Mediterranean. But with harsh winter conditions expected soon in the region, the suffering of the thousands of migrants traveling through the Balkans is likely to worsen and may result in further loss of life if adequate measures are not taken. The international community should react now, says Johns Hopkins University professor Charles Gatti, a specialist in Europe and Eurasia.
Well, the Balkan countries need and require extensive financial support to handle this. Most recently, of course, Chancellor Merkel offered 3 billion euros to Turkey to cooperate and do what needs to be done. It's not easy and it may not be enough, and there are many other countries there, but I hope their goodwill will help.
U.S. Coast Guard aviator Brian Lisko has spent much of his career working with search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean. He praises European efforts to deal with migrants coming by sea.
They've done an admirable job when they're confronted with thousands of people in unsafe boats, that the human smugglers are making money at the expense of the safety and welfare of these migrants. So they're doing a very good job saving lives at sea.
Kathleen Newland, co-founder of the Migration Policy Institute, says the 10,000 migrants the U.S. has agreed to accept is not really enough to help with the crisis.
I think over time the United States will begin to accept more Syrian refugees for resettlement here in the United States. But our procedures and our security screening for refugees is extremely bureaucratic and cumbersome and slow and expensive. So we're going to need to streamline our procedures a bit more, a lot more actually.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees last week appealed to donors for $96 million in additional support for the winter months for Greece and affected countries in the Balkans. The so-called winterization plan focuses on putting measures in place to support countries such as Croatia, Greece, Serbia, Slovenia and Macedonia to avert the risk of humanitarian tragedy and loss of life during the winter months. Jane Bojacijevski, VOA News.
Well, in the U.S., the president of the University of Missouri has resigned following weeks of protest by students who say he did not deal adequately with racial and minority discrimination on campus. The announcement comes in time to prevent a costly boycott of Saturday's game by the university's football team, which supports the protesters. Here's VOA's Laritza Hoke.
After weeks of simmering tensions and protests, the University of Missouri's flagship Columbia campus was the site of celebration Monday. Protesters welcomed the resignation of President Tim Wolf, who acknowledged that the university has not done enough to promote racial tolerance.
We stopped listening to each other. We didn't respond or react. We got frustrated with each other.
Jonathan Butler, an African-American student, went on a hunger strike a week ago over the administration's handling of racial issues, including slurs that have been directed at minority students. They culminated when someone used human feces to make the sign of swastika on a bathroom wall. The president of the Student Association says discrimination is not unique to Missouri.
It's an issue that is around the nation, but with the university, what happens here is that they have the opportunity to create an environment that is inclusive.
But little had been done until the school's football team, made up mostly of black students, joined the protests, saying there would be no practices or games until Wolf resigned. Boycotting just one game would have meant a huge financial loss for the university, an expert on African American studies told VOA via Skype.
It also has a profound cultural implication because, again, what these students are in some ways, what these students are announcing is they are not just athletes, they are student athletes, and their concerns are the same concerns as the other students.
Students have led many of the American human and civil rights movements over the past century, but experts say instant communication today gives them more power than ever before.
I don't know that the president of the University of Missouri would be resigning today were it not for the impact of social media and the front door seat that the world has to these events as they're unfolding.
The student action in Missouri also may encourage others to fight against discrimination and injustice on university campuses. Laritza Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, Russian officials say allegations that its athletes were part of a widespread doping conspiracy are groundless and insist its policies strictly adhere to those of the Global Anti-Doping Agency and the International Olympic Committee. We get more from VOA's Daniel Scherf in Moscow.
The World Anti-Doping Agency suspended Moscow's drug testing laboratory after issuing a critical report alleging state-sponsored doping in Russian athletics. Russia's anti-doping agency chief acknowledged unspecified problems, but said the country was improving and questioned the report's information.
When an athlete who has repeatedly violated rules and has been disqualified makes a statement, and when his word is given more weight than ours, it raises questions.
The WADA Commission recommended disqualifying several Russian athletes and coaches. Most significantly, it called for Russia to be banned from international athletics, including next year's Olympics in Brazil.
Speaking honestly, I cannot imagine that. Of course, it will be an enormous blow. I repeat once again, we hope for common sense of the IAAF council members, who first of all must work in the interest of the sport.
Russian officials say they will cooperate with the international sports bodies, but also imply the WADA report is an anti-Russian conspiracy, a view echoed by many Russians.
Sport is becoming politicized. Everyone in the world arena heckles Russia like an unwanted third party. Sport is following in the same footsteps.
I heard about it on the TV. It's insulting to listen to because it's not fair. I think it's all politics, political games against Russia, and I hope that our guys can find some arguments to prove them wrong. I'm really hoping for it.
The WADA Commission's mandate was to report on Russian athletics, but it says other countries and their athletes are likely doping as well. Meanwhile, athletes who lost to the alleged drug cheats want to be awarded their medals, and pressure is growing as more countries join calls for an international ban on Russian athletics. Daniel Sheriff, VOA News, Moscow.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. Check out our headlines 24/7 at voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, a Nigerian American gives back to the country of her birth. Stay with us.
From science and technology, here's what's new.
What would it be like to be able to go sightseeing in Rome 2,000 years ago? Well, now you can with a new app for iPad called Imperial Forum. This app lets you cruise through the ancient ruins of great public squares built by different Roman emperors, illustrating what these places looked like in real time. Let's let the app itself tell you more.
This application allows everyone to appreciate the transformations of Rome from antiquity until the present day in a central point of the city, the area of the Imperial Forum. The project, created by 3D Rome, permits a real journey through time that can take place both on-site and elsewhere. The virtual visitor finds himself immersed in scenes that can be superimposed and highlight the main stages in the city's development.
This app comes with maps in the History tab and is, as the Imperial Forum website says, coming soon. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossans.
I am Sheikha Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Welcome back to Africa 54. November the 11th is Veterans Day in the United States, and two distinguished Americans who both made their mark during and after World War II came to New York to be honored in the Veterans Day Parade. This was the first time they had met, but not the first time their lives had crossed. VOA's Bernard Schatzman reports.
A bombing raid over Germany. Alongside the bombers were fighter escorts that allowed the mission to be a success. This World War II scene had become routine for two very accomplished 93-year-old men.
I see the guy with the cap on. So.
Acclaimed TV writer Norman Lear was the gunner on a B-17 for 52 combat missions over Germany. His protector, then fighter pilot, now educator, Roscoe Brown, was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, the popular name for a group of African-American military pilots who fought in World War II.
And make the world better.
They had never met before, but seemed like lifelong friends. Brown said he had escorted Lear's bombing group on a raid over Berlin and knocked a much faster German jet out of the sky.
As I got close to Berlin, I saw this jet streaking up. And that's when I said, drop your fuel tanks and follow me. And the jets were coming up here. I was up here. I turned down, came down under the bombers, turned into the jet, into his blind spot, used my K-14 gun sight, which is an electronic gun sight, to put a circle around the target, hit the trigger, boom, blew up the jet.
Lear said the mission took 16 hours from Italy to Berlin and then back to Italy. It was considered the longest mission in the European theater of war.
A reasonable amount of fighters and flak, and that's why there's more than a reasonable amount of gratitude for the Tuskegee guys who flew our escorts so often.
Brown says that Tuskegee Airmen's role in World War II shattered myths about black Americans.
The stereotype was that African Americans didn't have the intelligence, the courage, the leadership ability to fly airplanes and be fighter pilots. And we certainly destroyed that myth.
Lear, creator of numerous iconic American television shows, was visibly moved to be finally meeting a man who may have saved his and his crew's lives many times over.
He was our escort, which is to say he was our lifesaver in cases, flying to protect the bombers, and that we would meet 70 years later.
Bernard Chessman, VOA News, New York.
That's awesome. Now, many of us leave our native countries for various reasons. Very often, those who choose to stay in their adoptive countries send money to assist their families. But some give back to their communities. Africa 54's Esther Gido-Ewart is in the studio to tell us more. Esther.
Yes, Vincent, the story of Professor Christiana Okechukwu of Nigeria is one of compassion and love for her community. And as the saying goes, if you educate one, you educate the village. Professor Christiana Okechukwu teaches at Montgomery College in the U.S. state of Maryland. She is a Nigerian working in the U.S., but whose heart is in her native country. She runs the Inwele Center in Enugu to help young girls who leave school without marketable skills. But what motivated her to start the center?
I felt that if I empower one of them, it becomes a multiplier effect. If it's within a family, that family will now start learning from one of them. Like the girl that's now a chemical engineer. She's been able to influence her other sisters to also toe the line and go to school.
Widowed early, she was left with 3 young children whose future she often worried about. She hoped if anything happened to her, others would step up and give her children an education. That worry was her wake-up call, which started the ball rolling.
When you have gotten your own skill, so that one, they are not forced to get into marriage just too early and face violence against women. And I will tell you, the girls that started it, some of them now are chemical engineers.
At the Inwele Center, her focus has been on young girls, but young men are also showing up asking for training. She now holds what she calls yearly boot camps that last a month, where young people learn various skills that transform their lives.
We teach them horticulture, we teach them folk tales, it's an intensive 1 month. They go through that 1 month, they're never the same again.
Okechukwu has a piece of advice for Africans living overseas who very often send money through MoneyGram or Western Union to their families back home.
There's a material things that we fade. Any clothes you buy this year, by next 2 years, it's out of fashion. But then if you help these children to have education, then they will be able to buy their own clothes.
Professor Okechukwu has also written several books and refers to her Inwele Center as Little America, that she has taken back to the village in Nigeria, where time is utilized the way it should and where teachers and students are held accountable.
If you help these children to have education, even an armed robber cannot take it from your brain.
And through the Inwele Center, Professor Okechukwu is building her community in her birth country of Nigeria and wants other Africans living abroad to make a difference by giving back as well. Professor Okechukwu had many success stories of young men and women whose lives have been transformed by the skills they get from her Inwele Education and Resource Center in Enugu, Nigeria. I like how she sums it up. If you have education, even an armed robber cannot steal it from your brain, Vincent.
Yeah, that's powerful. And do you notice, Esther, that I think as you've lived around here for years, many of those who live here find different ways, rather, different forums to help people back home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And, it's happening everywhere in the diaspora, whether you are from one country of Kenya, of Africa to another one. Yeah. You still give back in a way, not just to your own family, but to the community. It's just difficult to be able to zero in on everybody who is doing something and tell their story. But that is, one great success story that Professor Okechukwu, has set an example. And Nigerians here and many in the diaspora are saying we don't need a lot of money to be able to do something for the society.
Sure, and sometimes, you're doing something yourself, or sometimes you're contributing to some initiative or giving to somebody who's already doing something on the ground. And it's fabulous. I think we need to commend everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Esther.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. The Navy's best and brightest to get funky. And the results go viral. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Africa, a judge sentences 8 policemen to 15 years in prison for murder of a Mozambican taxi driver. In Egypt, officials fear significant drop in tourism following a Russian plane crash that killed 224 people. In Malta, African leaders attend a summit to discuss the migrant crisis. The EU is expected to offer aid to African nations. In Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari appoints 36 ministers to cabinet after a 5-month delay. We stay in Nigeria, where citizens remember activist Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was executed by the military 20 years ago. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. They are the future defenders of America's shores, and they flash some serious dance moves. Midshipmen from the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, posted a YouTube video Sunday that shows their spin on the ubiquitous Uptown Funk video by Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars. The mids in their white uniforms recreated the video with no money and in an all-midshipmen cast and crew. The revamped catchy chorus is all about life in Annapolis. Not surprisingly, the video has gone viral with over 2 million views on YouTube, and just in time for Veterans Day. Next up, Greystone Mansion in Los Angeles, California is transformed with the latest trends in interior design. The beautiful 1928 building, once belonging to an oil magnate family, is given a very modern makeover with the help of more than 20 top international designers. Big trends for the new year are on display, including smoky tones, dark rich blues, tone-on-tone, the mixing of metal finishes, the mixing of styles and artisan statement pieces. According to the designers, showcasing their talents at the Greystone Mansion, it's time to forget the perfectly executed room, marching and seamless. Instead, it's time to choose some statement pieces and let them shine. And that's what's trending today, Vincent.
Well, thank you. Washilesh Shabalala spent more than a decade in prison for armed robbery, but he now teaches township kids who are at risk of turning to crime IT skills. He was recently highlighted by the World Economic Forum for his project, which is giving disadvantaged youth a new lease on life. VOA's Paul Dio has more.
Former inmate Siheli Shabalala spent nearly 11 years behind bars. He was just 19 years old when he was incarcerated. And while in prison, he taught himself how to write a computer code, and it helped turn his life around. Today, Shabalala is using those skills to touch other lives. He has partnered with another former inmate to start the Brothers for All Center in Langa Township, Cape Town. The duo empowers disadvantaged children by teaching them basic computer skills. As the students get better, they learn more complex coding, which makes it possible to create computer software, apps, and websites.
We work with high school dropouts, teenage mothers, unemployed youth, and employed youth, and also ex-offenders and offenders that we teach coding. According to the polling organization Statistics South Africa, poverty, drugs, and crime are rife in the country's poor communities. But initiatives like a coding project can help to empower the youth who live in the poor townships to get life skills. Gilbert Duku Zumrami is another volunteer who works with Brothers for All. He is an IT graduate who immigrated to South Africa from Rwanda.
I decided to come in South Africa by the intervention of one of my friends. He gave me a ring to Brothers for All. Then when I came there, I meet, this is my place to be, because I know how to code. I did coding. Then I decided to help them as a volunteer.
Those who attend coding classes say they have not only gained valuable new skills, but the classes also keep them away from negative activities.
It does help me a lot because in Kailicha there's a lot of gangsters there. Every time when you're going outside, there's a lot of guys sitting on the corners, smoking, and every time, like, when you come across them, you just get scared of them. So computer, this programming, it helps me a lot because most of the time I spend my time here programming, and it keeps me out of bed, like minds. Yeah.
Shabalala says his work is receiving recognition both locally and abroad, including at the World Economic Forum earlier this year. He says working with disadvantaged communities is driving his passion.
Now, the response has been quite amazing because now these are type of people that have never thought that they would do something magnificent with their lives. But because now they are given the opportunity, they then see now something different and a light at the end of the tunnel.
The Brothers for All initiative is giving young people from Cape Town's poorest communities the opportunity to turn their lives around. Still, with a few job opportunities and literal education, many more youth continue to struggle, resorting to crime and a life of violence. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
And that's our show. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Music is something that brings people together.
Music educates, it motivates, it's a bridge.
Music. Ali.
On
VOA.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent.